What's up, everybody? Steve here. I'm going to talk about a couple of things regarding tenants as well as landlords, and mostly smaller landlords and maybe even mid-sized landlords. So let's go ahead and jump into this. Tenant evictions, it's got to eventually happen. I know they keep extending this over and over and over, but let's talk about some numbers and what's going on. For one thing, if you are a tenant and you are not paying your rent, please understand two things. Number one is you still are on the hook for that back rent no matter how you twist or turn it. So be cautious of that. If you're paying $1,000 a month and you haven't paid in the last 12 months and you have $12,000 that you have not paid your landlord, you are on the hook for that. So what I foresee and what I predict is what's going to happen is when everything kind of settles down and these eviction processes start to take place, these small landlords are going to start suing tenants. They're going to start suing these tenants for back rent that these landlords are owed. And also, even if these landlords do not pursue their legal rights in most states to collect that back rent, tenants are going to have a very, very, very difficult time getting future housing. Okay, so in our real estate firm in Southwest Florida, we've managed many properties over the years, and I can tell you, with the people in place in our organization and the background checks and everything that we have to do to basically ensure that we're putting a good tenant into a property for our landlord, we have to ensure certain things like employment, credit, background, stuff like that. But more so is there is an application of where they were previously living, and now on that application, if there's a void in time where they say that, they don't put where they lived in the last year, then that's going to throw up a flag. Now, if they put where they lived in the last year, odds are our team, as well as many other property managers, are going to call the previous landlord to find out, how they kept the property, did they pay on time, and everything else. And I believe what's going to happen is a lot of these phone calls, when these tenants move out or they get evicted and they're trying to find housing in different areas or apartment complexes, when management there is going to call on past landlords, a lot of these tenants are going to get rejected. So keep that in mind if you guys are a tenant right now. It's estimated, it's a big swing, and I think it might even be on the higher side of this number, but it's estimated right now $30 billion to $70 billion in back rent. I mean, those are some huge numbers that we're looking at, and I bet you it's probably even more than 70 billion. As of mid-January in 2021, it was estimated about 10 million renters were behind on rent, and coming into February, roughly 16 million had little confidence that they could pay rent in February. So this is just compounding and delaying the inevitable, which we're going to talk about more here in a second. But let's talk about the landlords and the small landlords, okay? So we got landlords who are struggling because they are not receiving payment from their tenants. So what does that mean? That's taking in consideration not just them being unable to pay for their mortgage, but think about the other things like their insurance, to insure the property and ensure if something happens to the property, like, if a fire happens or whatever the case is. So if they don't have that money coming in, odds are they're having a very hard time paying for insurances. Another thing, and another video I did, was basically delinquent real estate taxes. That's another thing that people will let go if they're unable to pay their mortgage or real estate taxes. I did a whole other video. I'll put the link at the end of this video for you guys to check that out as well. And then there's other ancillary things, like if the landlord was covering, say, some of the utilities, or let's say they were covering a pool if there was pool service or lawn service. That stuff's going to go, that is, a lot of that stuff is not going to get paid either. And then that's a trickle effect. Think about it. If somebody's not paying their lawn guy, then that lawn guy's business is starting to suffer as well. So there's a lot of domino effects, as we say, that are going to take place because of the top not paying down the bottom. So unfortunately, it's really hurting a lot of people, not just the people that are not making payment in terms of a struggle. The next thing is some landlords are already at that tipping point and they cannot hang on. I was watching the news the other day and there was a story about a gentleman. He owned a handful of properties and you know, it's heartbreaking. There's no doubt about it. And this gentleman specifically had to sell one of his properties and he sold it $70,000 below market value because he had to get rid of it. And the new buyer, the probably investor that came in, assumed that liability and they assumed that tenant in that property. And for the investor, you know, they're getting a deep discount on the property and that's good, but they do assume that liability and they're eventually going to have to evict that person most likely if they don't resume paying. And unfortunately for the landlord, in order to have somebody else buy the property with basically a squatter in place not paying their rent, who's gonna pay retail or even close to market value for that property? Nobody's going to take that risk, unfortunately. So that landlord specifically got hit $70,000 below market value for that sale. I bet you we're going to see more of that. And if, you know, that guy had equity in the property. So these other landlords that, you know, that maybe don't have equity and they're leveraged a little too high, they're probably going to go into a foreclosure position in the future, unfortunately. Another thing is these small landlords, man, it's sad to say, but a lot of these landlords, they're small investors and they save their entire lives to buy these properties and that was their source of retirement. That's what they lived off of. So when you have a tenant not paying and you have the inability to evict them because of government regulations, these people are hit. And, you know, it's unfortunate that, you know, we do have this kind of government intrusion. I get it. There's people that need housing, and but unfortunately, if you do a blanket statement and say, hey, you know, you don't have to pay your rent, a lot of people are going to be affected by this, and I think that was a miscalculation by the government for sure. They should not have done that. They should have done maybe a case-by-case situation, but not a blanket federal government mandate like this. I think it's horrible. And a lot of people, you know, unfortunately, they're going to have to change their livelihoods. A lot of these people that are the small investors that thought they were, you know, doing well for themselves, and they're hurt right now. It's sad. It's estimated that there's about 10 to 11 million small landlords, and the small landlord is landlords who own between 1 and 2 properties. So you got about 10 to 11 million people that own 1 to 2 properties, rental properties, and odds are there's a lot of those people not paying rent to these landlords. And now this doesn't take in consideration even mid-sized landlords or in between mid-sized and small landlords as well. So I think that time will tell, but there's a lot of landlords that are in trouble right now, even with all the options for forbearances. I know that there's some landlords that are not even able to exercise their rights for forbearances in some situations. So I think that we're going to see a lot more inventory coming to market, but I really feel bad for a lot of these small landlords. Anyway, take a look at this next video that I have on real estate taxes and the delinquencies. I'm going to show you guys a specific example of Lee County in Southwest Florida so you guys can see the trends and in terms of delinquent taxes, and it's trending up. So take a look at that video next. If you got any value out of this, appreciate a big thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one. See you.